Hi everyone, my name is Sam Hofmeyr and I'm presenting on behalf of Youth for MPAs, which is a youth movement of young people passionate about ensuring the protection of our oceans. Today I'm going to be talking about safeguarding our oceans for the future and what role we as individuals can play in conservation. So let's start with what is there to protect. Our ecosystems in the ocean space protect water quality, they remove nutrients and pollutants, they trap sediment, they maintain species and genetic diversity, which allows species to adapt to things like climate change. It also has great habitat diversity that we need to protect. So in all these diverse habitats we'll find an array of different kinds of creatures. I'm sure if we were to collect from each one of you all the different habitats that are within your ocean spaces, this list would be a lot longer, but this is the one I was able to pull together for South Africa. What's also important to protect is our cultural heritage. The sea is a place of cleansing and spiritual renewal for a lot of people. We also want to protect coastal resilience. So keeping our coasts healthy provides resilience in ecosystems. It armors our shorelines. Healthy shorelines protect and buffer coastal communities and infrastructure from extreme weather and sea level rise, which is something that we're seeing more of in today's climate landscape. We also want to protect fisheries sustainability. So fish have spawning and nursery areas, and we need these areas to be maintained for food and job security. For many, fishing is a way of life. There's also tourism that we want to protect. So our oceans provide us with fun things to do, and these fun things also provide jobs. For example, there's whale watching and scuba diving. Having tourism within our marine systems also allows a lot of tourists to come and visit our country, which is also good for people's livelihoods. And if you're in a landlocked country, you may be wondering how the ocean benefits you. Does it even benefit you? And the answer is yes. So off the top of my head, an example is the weather. So the weather, no matter what part of the continent you're on, is impacted by our oceans. Our oceans are part of the weather system. There's also the fact that our oceans are living laboratories. They provide lots of opportunities for researchers to learn more about our marine life. For example, there are sponges within our waters that have been found to have cancer-fighting compounds. I'm sure many of you may have seen some form of this picture before, because rainforests are often seen as the lungs of our planet. Rainforests are responsible for about third or 28 to 30% of the Earth's oxygen. But what are the real lungs of our planet? Our oceans. So 50 to 70% of the oxygen in the atmosphere actually comes from our oceans and the marine plants that live within it. Our oceans are also responsible for absorbing a lot of our CO2 emissions that are in the atmosphere. So to sum up all of that, why should we safeguard our oceans? To keep ecosystems working properly, to protect a range of species that live within our oceans, and ultimately to help people benefit from our oceans. So the world has come up with several meetings, groups, and frameworks over the years to work towards this. The United Nations member states in 2015 created 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. And every year there's an SDG progress report, which is based on the Global Indicator Framework and information from national and regional systems. So Goal 14 is focused on conserving and sustainable use of our ocean, seas, and marine resources. Healthy oceans and seas are essential for our existence, and they cover about 70% of our blue planet. We have, however, managed to do tremendous damage to these precious resources. I'm going to present to you some facts from the last report on Goal 14. The number of overfished stocks globally has tripled in the last 50 years, and today a third of the world's assessed fisheries have been fished to a point where they can't produce enough fish to replace that which we are taking out. There's also a very common one that I'm sure everyone here has been impacted by or has at least witnessed, and that is marine pollution. Another is ocean warming and acidification, which has to do with increased CO2 levels. There's changing ecosystems, there's sea level rise, and like I mentioned earlier, changes in our weather patterns. There is eutrophication or excessive plant and algae growth, which is caused by carbon dioxide and nutrients coming into the water. So when this happens, you have excessive growth of algae, but also excessive death of those algae, which then leads to areas in the ocean where there's no oxygen. These are called dead zones, and dead zones are on the rise. There's over 3 billion people around the world who rely on our oceans, and we have the responsibility to look after our planet, maintaining livelihoods and ecosystem services for our people. So how do we safeguard our oceans? We do this through protected areas. The report showed that over half of key biodiversity areas are not protected. So how do we ensure we can continue to enjoy the benefits of these resources and avoid or at least minimize these serious and ongoing threats? Through protected areas, or locally managed marine areas, or other effective conservation measures. There are many new management strategies that have been created to tackle the problem of marine protection, with communities at the center. The United Nations, through the Sustainable Development Goals, set the target for 10% of the ocean to be protected by 2020. It's now 2023, and we didn't hit that target. Globally, only about 8% of our ocean is protected, and just 2.4% is no-take, meaning areas where nothing can be extracted. Let's say, for example, this image is a map of the world's oceans. That means that only this much of it is protected. Only this much of it is protected within a no-take zone. That means most of the biodiversity that you can see in the world map is not protected in some form, and also is not protected from extractive practices. My question to you then is, do you think that 2.4% is enough to protect this habitat, and this one, and that one, and all of the habitats that are representative of our beautiful marine ecosystems? Let me tell you the story of South Africa. South Africa has a rich diversity of coastal and ocean ecosystems. We meet the warm Indian Ocean, the cold Atlantic Ocean, and the Southern Ocean along our coast. In 2018, we had 25 marine protected areas. That means from that global map, only 0.4% of our South African ocean space was protected. So looking at this image, that is 0.4% of South Africa's ocean. Not covering much of the representative species we were able to see, is it? Of that, only 0.16% was no-take. This led to plans being initiated to increase protection in 2016. These plans involved an incredible amount of research and talking to the government by many institutions in South Africa. They showed and discovered with our government what species and habitats are found all along our coastline, and this advanced towards implementing hand in hand with a project by government designed to fast-track economic growth in our country. Conservationists, scientists, and government leveraged this and said, well, if you're going to increase economic growth, do it in combination with protection. 20 new protected areas were finally declared in 2019, expanding our protection of our mainland ocean territory to 5%. So this is where we come in. Youth have been pivotal in the process, engaging with government to ensure that their voices are heard, advocating for increasing protection in our oceans. Youth MPAs is a youth-led organization that formed in 2018 with the aim to advocate for the creation and expansion of protected areas. And they are proudly supported by Wild Oceans, which is a program of the Wild Trust. So what exactly did the youth do? Well, we did many things, one of which was writing letters to our ministers, large stakeholders, the Departments of Environmental Affairs, and we highlighted the concerns of the youth, expressing the need for conservation for future generations. This avenue allowed us to make use of the law. For example, South Africa has a very strong constitution, which Youth for MPAs can and has made use of when addressing officials. In line with this, When government holds public meetings, Youth for MPAs is there. Youth for MPAs is asking the right questions of our government officials and putting ourselves on their radar. The youth have been building relationships, so we have brought members of the public together to demonstrate a need for action. This image here in particular was a march that was arranged to express the disapproval of youth to have large oil companies allowed access to perform harmful surveys in our ocean spaces. So what is important to note is that a march is not always the right answer to raising the voice of the youth. In this case it worked, but it's important to understand what messages will reach your target in a positive and assertive way. So at the end of the day, you want to create a partnership with those in charge of making these decisions, not an enemy. In addition to addressing government through law and publicity, to fight effectively for our ocean protection, the Youth for MPAs attended community engagements. We build relationships with people that we meet with, we learn from them, and you can't have a movement for people that doesn't include people. This is one of the most important points. So we often hold workshops with experts in the field that help educate us about protected areas, equipping us and empowering us to be able to work alongside our government in achieving marine protection targets. We organize ocean awareness and cleanup campaigns, and this is to further inform the public about our aims. Youth for MPAs are constantly engaged in activities and events to lead knowledge generation and improve awareness, and have participated in or held over 140 activities and events. We've also hosted the first African Youth Summit, which included 500 attendees from 18 African countries, and this was to discuss our protection targets. Our relationship building is also what took us to COP15 with our government officials as part of the South African delegation, giving us first-hand experience with our officials and helping us build those relationships. So key takeaways that I would like for you to remember during this talk is that education on your cause and capacity building of yourself and your network is important for the task ahead. You have to be clear on who your audience is and how you want to address them. You have to be clear on what you want to achieve, and you have to be respectful in your address. There are many ways to highlight an issue and to bring it to the table, and this doesn't always mean something controversial like a march. It could be any form of demonstration, could be a campaign strategy. Social media is also a very strong tool to be used. There's policies and laws to back up your claim and what you deserve to achieve in ocean protection. There's the ability to have spokespeople, and there's also science and art, which can help drive your message to the right target and with the right message. The conservation space has progressed, but there's by no means time for us to be passive about safeguarding our oceans. I have to point out that it's not always because a country doesn't want to, but largely because countries, especially in the global north, have failed to fund conservation efforts or lack the capacity to track and report environmental data. So what do we do now? The 30 by 30 goal. As part of COP15, which is the Convention on Biological Diversity, the signatory countries agree that we need to protect 30% of our oceans. The 30% part was chosen by scientists because it's a level that gives the planet a chance to recover and could protect millions of species from extinction. We need to advocate for proper science that highlights key areas for protection, either because of the habitats, the species, for connectivity, or for ecosystem services. For example, this is South Africa's critical biodiversity map. These maps are created taking into account the habitat types, species, fisheries, oil and gas, and all other stakeholders, and the software produces a map of potential areas where there would be least conflict between these groups. And from these deliberations begin, until all the relevant parties can conclude which areas are selected as new protected area sites. I'm not going to pretend to know much about the history of protected areas in Africa, but from a brief overview, it seems much of my understanding of protected areas in South Africa applies across the rest of Africa too. And this is that people don't always trust the idea of protected areas. They can seem restrictive to humans, and this is because they haven't always taken people into account. This is changing though, and social aspects are considered fundamental to the success of protected areas. This is a map of the African continent with all of the protected areas, both terrestrial with the green and marine with the blue. As you can see, the tiny blue areas are Africa's marine protected area spaces, and they aren't that many. How's your country doing in terms of protecting our ocean for future generations? Is there space for you to advocate, educate, or raise awareness? What I wanted to point out to you guys is that youth MPAs are just a bunch of normal people. They are no superheroes. This is who we are. Passionate young people like you, and you have so much to achieve. Youth for MPAs is set out to highlight to the powers in charge what the youth have to say. In the future, these are our oceans, and we want a bigger slice protected from harmful extractive practices. So something you can take away from this today is, what can you do to safeguard our oceans? The answer is simple. You can educate, advocate, and increase awareness for our oceans and for our future. Thank you.